The sky, a perfect blue canvas, untouched by clouds, a picture of peace. Then the sound, a deafening crack. Thunder, they called it. But there wasn't a cloud in sight. It started subtly, a rumble here, a boom there, easily dismissed, a trick of the wind, a distant storm. But the sky remained clear. The sounds persisted. They grew louder, more frequent, more unsettling. People whispered. They shared nervous glances. Something wasn't right. The skyquakes, they began to call them. An ominous name for an ominous phenomenon. No one knew what they were or where they came from. The skyquakes were a violation, a disruption of the natural order. They turned the familiar into something strange, something terrifying. The clear blue sky, once a symbol of peace, now held a silent threat, and no one knew what to do. Our town, nestled in a valley, had always been quiet, peaceful, isolated, some might say. But we liked it that way. We knew our neighbors. We knew the rhythm of life here. The skyquakes changed everything. The whispers started subtly, too, just like the sounds in the sky. People would pause on the street, their conversations trailing off as they looked up at the cloudless sky. Then a shake of the head, a muttered word, and they would move on. The older folks, they remembered stories, legends passed down through generations, tales of ancient spirits angered by forgotten rituals, of a curse upon the land, echoing through time. The stories were just that, stories, weren't they? Fear has a way of taking root in the fertile ground of uncertainty. It spreads like a weed, choking out reason and logic. And as the skyquakes continued, the fear in our town grew. It was in the air we breathed, in the water we drank. It was in our eyes when we looked at each other. The town meeting started soon after, crowded affairs filled with a nervous energy that crackled in the air like static. Everyone had a theory. Some blamed the weather, others the government. A few even whispered about aliens. The truth was, no one knew what was causing the skyquakes, and that was the most terrifying part of all. We were a town held hostage by the unknown. Our lives turned upside down by a force we couldn't understand, let alone control. The skyquakes became a constant presence, a low hum of dread that permeated our lives. We went about our days with a knot of anxiety in our stomachs, our ears constantly tuned to the sky, waiting, always waiting for the next one. I remember the day the first crack appeared. It started small, a hairline fracture in the pavement outside the general store. Then, with a deafening roar, it spread. A jagged scar ripped across the heart of our town, a physical manifestation of the fear that had been gnawing at us for weeks. Old Man Hemlock, they called him. A recluse who lived at the edge of town, surrounded by whispers and rumors. Some said he was crazy, others that he knew things he shouldn't. Things about the skyquakes. He'd been quiet for years, a shadow in the periphery of our lives. But the skyquakes, they stirred something in him. He started appearing in town, muttering cryptic warnings. His eyes, milky with age, held a terrifying knowledge. "It's the reckoning," he'd rasp, his voice a dry whisper. "The earth remembers, and it's come to collect." No one knew what he meant, but his words, fueled by fear and superstition, spread like wildfire. I remember seeing him one day, standing in the town square. His bony finger pointed accusingly at the sky. "They're coming," he croaked. "They're coming for what we've taken." Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, he was gone, leaving us to grapple with his chilling prophecy. Section 5. The fear takes root. Life in our town, once so simple, became a twisted reflection of its former self. Children stopped playing. Businesses closed. Laughter and chatter were replaced by silence. People saw shadows moving in the corners of their eyes, whispers on the wind like voices. Reality and delusion blurred. Fueled by fear, imaginations ran wild. Skyquakes became more frequent, intense, each one a hammer blow to our psyche, and always that terrifying sound, like the sky itself was splitting open. I remember the night I first felt it, the fear. A primal terror clawed its way up from the deepest part of my being. I was alone in my house, the silence broken only by creaking floorboards. And then I heard it, a low growl, deep and resonant from outside. It sent chills down my spine. I knew then that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Section 6. A crack in the sky. The sky tore open with a collective gasp. A literal tear, not metaphorical. A jagged fissure in the perfect blue. The crack pulsed with eerie light. Sickly green light cast distorted shadows. We watched, transfixed, as the impossible unfolded. Whispers, moans, and screams echoed from the fissure. Panic erupted. People screamed and ran. Section 7. The walls close in. The ground shuddered, a tremor that quickly escalated into a violent earthquake. Buildings swayed, their foundations groaning under the strain. Cracks spider-webbed across walls, tracing lines of fear through the very fabric of our town. Dust choked the air, a gritty haze that stung our eyes and scratched at our throats. The stench of sulfur, acrid and sharp, permeated everything. It was the smell of the underworld, a tangible reminder that something ancient and evil had been unleashed. Through the swirling dust and debris, I saw them, silhouettes at first emerging from the fissure in the sky. Their forms were vaguely humanoid, but twisted, grotesque, their eyes burning with an unholy light, fixed on our town with a hunger that chilled me to the bone. They descended slowly, gracefully, like predators stalking their prey, and in their wake the very air seemed to crackle with malevolence, a palpable aura of dread that pressed down on us, suffocating us with its intensity. The silence before the storm. An eerie silence descended upon the town. The creatures from the sky stood in our midst. Their eyes scanned the crowd, filled with a cold, calculating intelligence. They moved with an unnerving grace, their claws scraping the pavement. A low, guttural growl broke the silence. Fear surged through me. Section 9. Revelation. Old Man Hemlock, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying clarity, stepped forward. He raised his arms, his voice surprisingly strong as he addressed the creatures. "You have returned," he rasped, his words echoing in the unnatural silence, as the prophecy foretold. The creatures turned their attention to Hemlock, their heads cocked to one side in a grotesque parody of curiosity. One of them, taller than the others, its skin a particularly sickly shade of green, took a step forward. "We have been waiting," it hissed, its voice a grating rasp that seemed to vibrate deep within my chest. Waiting for the time to reclaim what was taken. Its words hung in the air, heavy with menace. Hemlock nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the creatures. "Yes," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "but the debt is not yours to collect. It is mine." He took another step forward, placing himself directly in front of the creatures. Section 10 echoes in the silence. The ground split open beneath Hemlock's feet, a gaping maw that swallowed him whole. The creatures, their eyes widening in surprise, were thrown back as a wave of energy erupted from the chasm. The air crackled and popped, the very fabric of reality seeming to distort and bend. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The fissure in the sky sealed shut, leaving behind nothing but a perfect, cloudless blue. The creatures were gone, vanished without a trace. And Old Man Hemlock, the last link to the truth behind the skyquakes, was gone with them. Silence descended upon the town, a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of our own ragged breathing. The dust settled, revealing the aftermath of the impossible events we had just witnessed. We were left standing there in the ruins of our lives, our minds struggling to comprehend the incomprehensible. The skyquakes were over, but the fear, the gnawing, primal fear of the unknown lingered. Section 11. An ending, or a beginning. Life, as it always does, went on. The town slowly rebuilt, the physical scars covered over with new brick and mortar, but the psychological scars, those remained, etched deep in our minds, a constant reminder of the day the sky tore open. The skyquakes became a part of our town's history, a dark legend whispered around campfires, a cautionary tale, a reminder of the unseen forces that govern our world, forces that we can barely comprehend, let alone control. And me? I never forgot the look in those creatures' eyes, the cold, calculating intelligence, the hunger. I knew deep down that they were still out there. Somewhere in the vastness of the universe, they were waiting, watching, and one day when we least expected it, they would return. The skyquakes may have ended, but the story, I fear, was far from over.